Okay, let's set the scene. Imagine it's late 2008. You're 33 years old, a Finn named Santeri, and you're on a plane to Beijing.
Yeah, and the global financial picture is looking, well, pretty shaky at this point.
Right, but you're embarking on this huge adventure anyway, leaving a decade-long career at Nokia, a big deal back then, to dive into China's IT and smartphone world, which was really starting to boom.
hmm
So today, we're trying to put you right there in Centauri's shoes, see this pivotal moment through his eyes.
And our main window into this, our sort of keyhole, is in Terry's own blog from the time. It was called Young Man in China,
Well,
ran through 2008, 2009.
exactly.
And it's not just, one guy's diary. It's really a firsthand snapshot of China during that intense growth period and what it was like for an early tech expat navigating it all.
Yeah, it's a fantastic source. So our mission for this deep dive is to focus on those first few months. We'll track his start in Beijing, the initial landing, and then crucially, his move down to Chengdu. Because that shift south, that contrast between the two cities, seems really telling about what he started to see as the real China.
It is fascinating, isn't it, to think about the backdrop as he's stepping off that plane. Lehman Brothers had collapsed literally just weeks before he landed in Beijing in October 2008.
Wow, yeah, the timing.
So this massive global financial uncertainty is just hanging in the air. You have to wonder how that even subconsciously sort of colored his first impressions, his feelings about this big life change.
Definitely adds a layer. Okay, so Beijing, October 2008. He arrives. What were those first impressions like? We probably get a hint from his blog post, Insimen in Chopeba.
Yeah, first workday. That's right. And, Beijing even then was a huge international city, an Olympic city just months before.
True. So maybe not total culture shock initially. There might have been some familiarity, some infrastructure he recognized.
Possibly. And he had done some pre-departure training. He blogged about it, posts like Tavoitina Oya Kunkutonan.
Goal, to be like home.
Right. And another one called Kinky Vinky, which is just China tips newts. So there was an effort to prepare him.
But how much can that textbook learning really do,
Right.
when you're actually there, facing the day-to-day reality of such a different place?
Exactly. Theory versus practice.
Yeah.
I mean, were there things about life in China that probably still completely blindsided him, despite the tips?
I'd imagine so. And it wasn't all just settling in at work, right? He got there just in time for, or maybe during, the Golden Week holiday.
Ah, yeah, the big national holiday week.
He read about that too, Lama Vika Tene Toi Minta.
Action-packed holiday week.
Sounds about right. So he got an early taste of that massive scale of movement, the crowds, the holiday atmosphere. Being swept up in that must be very different from just reading about it.
Oh, for sure. But then the story really takes a turn. November 2008, he moves south to Chengdu.
And the blog post title itself is significant. Comas Netas Chengdu.
Act 3, Chengdu. Yeah, he's deliberately setting it apart, isn't he? Suggesting this is different from Beijing, maybe different from the coastal hubs generally. He seemed to feel this was closer to the, quote, real China.
What do we think he meant by that, the real China?
Well, Chengdu is the capital of Sichuan province.
Right, known for spicy food, pandas.
Definitely. But back in 2008, it was much less internationalized than Beijing or Shanghai. Less of an expat bubble, maybe.
Okay, so fewer Western comforts, maybe less English spoken, just a more unfiltered experience.
That seems to be the implication. It wasn't quite the global crossroads that Beijing was aiming to be, so the cultural shift moving there would likely feel much sharper.
And connecting to that wider context again, we absolutely have to remember the Sichuan earthquake.
Devastating. May 2008, just 5 or 6 months before Santeri arrived in Chengdu.
The whole region was still deeply affected, right? Still recovering.
Absolutely. That backdrop of recent trauma and ongoing rebuilding, it must have created a very specific atmosphere in the city. Maybe a different kind of community feel, even. It definitely adds another complex layer to his experience there.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And this move to Chengdu brings us to one of the biggest practical hurdles he faced.
Uh-huh. The language barrier.
Yes. He wrote a post titled, pretty bluntly, Teele I Tosian Osata Englantia.
They really don't speak English here. Can't get much clearer than that.
Right. A stark contrast to Beijing, especially in the kind of international tech circles he might have been in there.
So this wasn't just like a minor inconvenience. It sounds like it fundamentally changed how he had to operate day to day. Suddenly, maybe he's much more reliant on others, less independent than his background might suggest.
It really highlights the difference in sort of everyday globalization between those two cities at that specific time.
And that leads to another intriguing blog post title, Call to Alice.
Yeah, what do you make of that? It sounds specific.
It really does. It makes you imagine, some situation where you just hit a wall, couldn't communicate something important, and literally had to phone someone, maybe this Alice, a colleague perhaps, just to get help.
It really drives home how essential having some kind of support network becomes immediately.
Absolutely. And it seems he recognized that need pretty quickly. He talks about finding a Chinese teacher.
Right. Mrs. Lai, we can call her.
Making that active decision to learn Mandarin, however basic at first, must have been totally crucial. Not just for ordering food, but for actually starting to feel settled, you
Oh,
know?
completely. Trying to communicate directly, even imperfectly, is a world away from just pointing or using a phrase book.
Totally different.
Hmm.
And beyond the formal lessons, there was the community he found at work or near work, Tianfu Software Park.
Ah, yes, the tech hub there.
He mentions expats from other big companies. Siemens, Nokia was there too, Alcatel-Lucent. You can imagine the relief of finding others in the same boat.
Yeah, grabbing lunch with, say, a hypothetical Mark from Siemens and just swapping stories. You won't believe what happened at the bank today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That shared experience, the humor, the practical tips. Hey, where do you get good coffee? That stuff is gold when you're navigating a new place.
Definitely. But it wasn't only expats, was it? He also seemed to connect with local students.
Yeah, from Sichuan University nearby.
So interacting with younger locals, maybe someone like, let's call him Chen, that could bridge the gap in other ways.
How so, you think?
Well, students might have had better English, maybe more exposure to foreigners, and they could offer really practical help, like, okay, this is how you set up a bank account, or no, don't take that bus, take this one. Those informal local connections can be lifesavers.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of lifesavers, there's that great little anecdote about food.
Oh, the bread.
Yes. Santeri, being Finnish, apparently really missed bread, just, normal bread.
A simple thing, but huge when it's gone.
And he found this Xinjiang-style restaurant near the university that became his go-to spot. It just shows how important those small comforts, those little anchors of familiarity can be when everything else feels so new and different.
Finding your Xinjiang bread place. It sounds small, but it's about building a routine, finding your spots.
Exactly. It makes a place start to feel a bit
Yeah.
more like home, even if it's just one restaurant.
So when we step back and think about these first few months, what are the big takeaways for you? He comes in with this solid professional background, right? A decade at Nokia.
Yeah, he wasn't like fresh out of university. He knew how multinationals worked, probably had some cross-cultural experience from that, adaptable,
He
presumably.
had a foundation.
But that professional skill set, while great for the job itself, probably didn't fully prepare him for the, let's say, the nitty-gritty of daily life in Chengdu.
Right. The challenge wasn't just a new office culture. It was basic communication, building a personal life from the ground up in a place where hardly anyone spoke his language.
And it really underscores the limits of that pre-departure training we mentioned earlier.
You can do the workshops, read the guides.
But nothing really prepares you for actually being there. Trying to explain to a taxi driver where you need to go, or figuring out how the heck the washing machine works when all the labels are in Chinese.
That's where the real learning happens, the immersion.
Which raises that question.
Mhm.
What does it really mean to settle into a new culture? Santeri's story suggests it's incredibly active.
Not passive at all.
No, it's about actively trying to learn the language, actively building that support network, finding your Miss Lee, your Mark, your Chen, and actively seeking out those little things like the Xinjiang bread that make it feel manageable, make it feel like your life.
Moving beyond just being a tourist, basically, engaging with the everyday stuff.
Yeah, and it's quite a juxtaposition when you think about it. While Santeri's grappling with learning Mandarin tones and finding edible bread in Chengdu.
Well, that's what was happening elsewhere.
Yeah, well, late 2008, pop culture-wise, people were probably watching the Mamma Mia movie, or maybe High School Musical 3.
Oh, wow, yeah. Or The Dark Knight, Iron Man, big blockbusters.
Exactly. So you have this very personal, localized struggle and adaptation happening for him,
Yeah.
while the rest of the world is kind of humming along to ABA or watching superheroes. It grounds his experience nicely.
It really does.
Yeah.
His blog gives us that specific personal view into that intersection, the global professional landing in a very local reality.
Yeah, those early posts really capture that friction, that process of finding his feet.
Okay, so summing up these initial months, a tale of two cities, really. Beijing was the introduction, maybe a bit more international, a softer landing in some ways. But then Chengdu, that was the deep end, much more immersive, the language barrier hit hard, and building connections, both expat and local, became absolutely vital for just navigating daily life.
And I think through his early experiences, you really get a feel for the unexpected hurdles, but also the quiet resilience needed to adapt to somewhere so different. It's a good reminder that cultural immersion isn't usually just a smooth, easy process,
Definitely not. And we'll definitely be diving deeper into Santeri's story, seeing how these first steps shaped his longer journey in China in future deep dives.
which brings us to a final thought, maybe something for our listeners to mull over. Thinking about Santeri's experience,
Hmm.
what are those seemingly small, everyday things in your environment?
Like what?
Like the ease of just asking for directions, finding your favorite type of coffee, understanding public transport announcements, things you take for granted. What would you unexpectedly miss if you suddenly moved somewhere totally different?
That's a good question.
And flipping it around, what kind of unexpected local knowledge do you imagine would suddenly become absolutely essential